The most unique of the 10 amendments is the 10th, because the first 9 talk about individual liberty and individual rights and how the government can't interfere with them. We know what these are: speech, self-defense, privacy, religion, travel, the right to confront your accusers, the right to have a lawyer, the right to have an impartial judge, the right to due process. The government can't take your property away. Just a little aside on that. Jefferson argued that there should be no eminent domain. Jefferson argued that your property is yours. And the only way the government could get it is through voluntary exchange, not just because they're the big bad government and they want your property for whatever reason. He lost that argument. The Fifth Amendment says there is eminent domain, but the government's got to pay you a fair market value for your property, and it has to be used for a public use. We get to the 10th, and it is a truism. It basically says the powers not delegated in this Constitution to the government, to the new government, are retained by the states and the people respectively. That was there to assure that what was written down in the Constitution, those little pieces of sovereignty that each state gave away, could not be expanded upon by the feds. And for the most part, for the first 75 years or so of this country, that was the law. Why? Because if a U.S. senator voted to give more power to Washington at the expense of the state, that senator would lose his job. And in fact, 7 U.S. senators were summarily recalled by their state legislatures because they did that. Well, after Lincoln waged war on half the country because they wanted to leave and be independent and not send tariff duties to Washington, the people who took over the government after Lincoln had these crazy progressive ideas in their head. And one of those progressive ideas, which wouldn't see the light of day for 2 generations later, was that, you know what? We can't trust the states to send people to Washington. We have to get rid of the 10th Amendment. We want to be able to write whatever rules we want. They knew that they couldn't rescind the 10th Amendment. They knew that as part of the American value is the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights. So they added an amendment to nullify the 10th. Question: can an amendment to the Constitution itself be unconstitutional? Answer: if it assaults the very basic values of the Constitution. Remember that federal table: the people, the states as states, the country as a whole. The 16th Amendment said, we don't trust the states to send senators anymore. We're going to have the people elect them, subject to the same political pressures, the same pressure groups, the same popular enthusiasm that the House of Representatives has. And from that time on, the states began losing more and more power because senators didn't represent the states as states. They represented the people who sent them there. That's why you'll see a senator from New York coming to California to campaign for campaign funds. He couldn't care less about the government of the state of New York. He just wants his own job and doesn't care where the money comes from. And things, of course, began to unravel from that point. The same progressive attitude that enacted the 16th Amendment, the 17th Amendment, changing the way senators were elected, also enacted the 16th. You know, there were 2 income taxes prior to the 16th Amendment, and both times the Constitution was upheld. The Supreme Court found them unconstitutional. Did you know that the original Constitution forbade the new government from taxing our incomes? But the progressives, of course, got that changed, and hence the 16th Amendment, which allows the federal government to tax our income. So in the short period of time, from the Civil War to the progressive era, we went from a government that basically dealt with defending us, delivering the mail, operating the court system, making sure commerce went between the states, to one that would tell us what to eat and what to drink and when to work, what to drink. They even outlawed alcohol, for gosh sakes. The same mentality that changed the way senators were elected, because this crowd believed that it knew what was better for us than what we know is good for ourselves. They chose power over freedom. When we were a new nation, if you read what the founders said, their greatest fear was that the government would have too much power. And the representatives who went to Congress, whether elected by the people in the House or sent by state legislatures, were more concerned with liberty and with assuring that whatever the government did, it stayed within the confines of the Constitution, as Jefferson liked to say, chained down by the Constitution. After the Civil War and into the progressive era, the concept of liberty did not predominate, the concept of power predominated. And what the federal government could get away with, it did.